That's what I knew she would do. Thank you all so much for joining us. Again, my name is Brooke Bright. I am a newish member to the family school in Chicago. This started halfway through last year, so excited to be a part of the community. So this conversation, I'm excited to do a lot of listening to our wonderful folks that we have joining us. David had reached out to everybody and said, David Kovacs, who is would love for him to turn his camera on at some point to say hello. There he is. Uh, Founding families of the family school in Chicago, really running things, much to his chagrin, and still keeping things going, which is so wonderful, and we're grateful for it. So I just wanted to do quick table setting introductions of all the fabulous people that you may or may not know joining us on this call. So first of all, we have Susan Katz Miller, the author of 2 books for interfaith families, Being Both, Embracing 2 Religions in One Interfaith Family from 2013, and the Interfaith Journal from 2019. She has appeared as an interfaith families expert in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and on the Today Show, and on NPR's All Things Considered, and on many, many podcasts. She's an interfaith kid herself and the parent of 2 grown next-generation interfaith kids who were raised at the Interfaith Families Project of Greater Washington, D.C. So welcome, Susan. We have Reverend Samantha Gonzalez-Block, is the Christian spiritual leader of the Interfaith Families Project of Greater Washington, the IFFP, a graduate of Barnard College and Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. Samantha has a passion for building bridges across faith traditions and cultures. She has served as pastor in Asheville, North Carolina, a communications officer for the United Nations Campaign to End Violence Against Women, a teacher for Interfaith Community, IFC, in New York City, and a women's rights advocate in Chile. She also loves teaching salsa dance, slam poetry, and storytelling. She's published in Journal for Preachers, Uncommon Bonds, Women Reflect on Race and Friendship, and The Porch Magazine. Samantha grew up in a Jewish Christian home, and her 2 children are being raised in her faith. So welcome, Reverend Samantha. And then finally, we have Rabbi Ari Moffic, Director of Youth and Teen Experiences at the Cohen Kadima Program. Whoever just joined us and maybe did not mute, I'm going to kindly ask you to check and make sure that you're muted while I'm doing introductions. Sometimes it's hard to tell, especially if you're on a phone. Okay, excellent. Rabbi Ari Moffic has worked as a rabbi educator for over 20 years, but it's only recently she's discovered her true calling and passion, be mitzvahs. She's the founding director of Interfaith Family Chicago, now 18 Doors, starting the first Your Community initiative, where she focused for 6 years on supporting interfaith couples and families as they explore Jewish life. She recently received her first Open Door Project grant, given to 4 rabbis nationwide to strengthen our own communities. In this entrepreneurial venture called Cohere, she worked with unaffiliated families to develop Jewish identity and learning. Rabbi Ari has a BA in Religious Studies from Indiana University, a master's degree from Baltimore Hebrew University in Jewish Education and Communal Studies, and was ordained at Hebrew Union College. She has served as the Director of Education in area congregations, which has included writing and implementing creative curricula and building community. So welcome, Rabbi Ari. That is all the formal introductions we will do. And now we're just going to get into talking with these fabulous people. So again, just to set the stage and kind of the history of what we mean by these interfaith communities, I would love to turn it to our participants, our speakers here, to talk about the creation of the communities that you're a part of right now. So if I could turn it maybe over to Susan or Reverend Samantha to get started.
Yeah, thank you. It's so exciting to be here. You know, David and I have known each other, been working in tandem on in our separate communities for decades, but always been in touch. And I've been to Chicago a couple times. He's been to Washington. And we always talk about getting together more often, and here we are. And so I'm really grateful that Chicago created this opportunity. In my first book, Being Both, I trace the development of the various groups, and the three that have persisted and been most robust are New York, Chicago, and the two in Chicago and Washington. Our group in Washington, Interfaith Families Project, is turning 30 this year. Chicago and New York were founded first, I believe. They were founded independently of each other, but sort of vaguely knew about each other, and all had slightly different origin stories. So for us in Washington, D.C., we did not have any support from any religious institution. We didn't have a Catholic church that gave us space or encouraged us. It was entirely driven by parents who wanted interfaith education for their kids and created an interfaith education program. And from there, it kind of grew out into adding on programming for adults, eventually hiring a religious education director, and then adding on the Jewish and Christian spiritual directors. So we've had a rabbi and a minister for a long time now. And we're about 100 families. The pandemic was tough, but we came back, and we grew in the first 10 years a lot, and then sort of have seemed to be on a plateau of 100 families. People come, people go. It's a really nice size. Pretty much everybody in the community does know each other on some level. We had been meeting in a Jewish day school for the past several years, and this fall we moved over to being in a Presbyterian church. So, we've shifted back and forth in terms of our meeting space, as well as a lot of other things. So I'm not sure what else you want to know, but maybe I'll stop there.
I love it. I would love to also open it up to Rabbi Ari, not to talk about the founding of the Chicago School, but the current state. What is the family school in Chicago for some of our visitors that may not be familiar with what's happening in Chicago?
David, do you want to say how many families there currently are in the structure of volunteers, of how it works and functions? And
Yeah, I could do that real briefly. And then we can turn it over to Dave Mizell from the Union School in suburban Chicago. Family School is a parent-taught cooperative endeavor hosted by Old St. Pat's, downtown church in Chicago. And we celebrated our 30th anniversary last year with a Violins of Hope concert. This was a national touring endeavor that was hosted at Old St. Pat's to an almost full house of music played on instruments rescued from the Holocaust. It was a wonderful celebration. We take turns teaching. The parents teach their kids. We have professional teachers in 7th and 8th grade. We plateaued as well, Susan. We had classes of 15 and 20 kids in the early years. Now our largest class is first grade and second grade, when we have, I believe, 14 or 15 kids. But we have 70 to 80 families. I'm not sure exactly how many. And we gain some and lose some. Our parent teaching model kind of evolved because in the beginning there were just 7 families and we couldn't hire a Christian and a Jewish teacher. So the parents said, let's roll up our sleeves and do it. My wife Patty has written the curriculum and 4 textbooks that we use, which we're happy to share with anybody. It's really a cooperative endeavor. Everybody volunteers for something, and it's a great thing. So I'll stop there.
So Dave Mizell from the Interfaith Union School in suburban Chicago. I would say we stand on the shoulders of giants, which is the downtown school. David, and everyone that spent so much time putting the curriculum together. We highly leverage that. We use the same curriculum. There are about 20 to 25 families right now in the school. As you guys have mentioned, we were pre-COVID almost double that size, and have just seen a lot of people pause during COVID, maybe didn't come back, life got busy. So but we use the same program that they do. So we have parents teaching all of the classes. So we do we try to keep it with one Jewish parent and one Catholic parent. Typically they cycle through with the same grade. So we teach kindergarten through ideally 8, which is great for them to see the kids grow, very different conversations. One thing that we also do is we offer a Hebrew program for the kids, 3rd through 7th grade. And over the past couple of years, we've got the program, and we have past students come back and teach the beginnings of Hebrew to the new students. So they're typically like all high school kids that are coming back and getting the kids started. I think they're building a good foundation. Are they able to go straight into their Torah portion? Probably not, but we found that this is a pretty good program. It's nice to get those the kids that have just graduated, that their families are still involved in. They got younger siblings. They're coming back anyways, and we may as well put their minds and bodies to good use.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple things. We also have a Hebrew program and a First Communion preparation program. Those are they're co-curricular. They're optional, and they take place after the school. And then the other thing I'll say is, I don't know where we'd be without our clergy. We've had wonderful clergy through the years, rabbis and priests who just love this, and it just shows. And we are blessed in so many ways by that.
Yeah, extremely fortunate that there are so many clergy that are open and willing to support the groups here in the Chicagoland area. I know that has not always been the case, or it's been harder to find, but it does seem like we've got a pretty good group to really what's supporting us.
Sam, do you want to talk a minute about the DC education program? Because I didn't really talk about that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, hello everyone. It's so nice to be with everyone tonight. I feel like we're all siblings in this work, so it's really exciting it's like a family reunion. So I'm really overjoyed to be here. So yeah, just to give you a sense of our Sunday school, there's a lot of similarities. And we have also education starting from pre-K all the way through 8th grade. And in the classroom as well, we have a Jewish teacher and a Christian teacher, and we have a really robust curriculum. One of the things that we're doing this year, which has been really fun, is we've been trying to kind of keep Sunday school and our gathering or our worship time in conversation with each other, which has been really fun. So the kids have been learning about Sukkot, and then the next week we're having a gathering about Sukkot, or they're learning a song about, Advent, and the next week we have Advent. So that's been kind of a thing that we've been bringing in this year, which has been really fun. And then our students, once they graduate out of our program, serve as interns in the classroom, which has been a meaningful thing as well. The kids receive Hebrew, and our coming of age program is really in their 7th and 8th grade year, is something akin to a confirmation or a bat mitzvah. Some kids choose to have that in addition to the coming of age, but really the idea of the coming of age is a chance to take in all that they've learned throughout the years, and they each tackle one of the big life questions. So things like who is God, or how do we build the beloved community, or why do bad things happen to good people? And so they tackle one of those questions and then do a presentation at the end of that, which is always a very meaningful experience. But that's just a little bit about the program. But the idea is, like us all, kind of giving the kids those tools to learn about Judaism and Christianity side by side and get to claim all of who they are.
And the Washington program, we also use parents as the teachers in the classroom.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Chicago and Washington both use parents. The New York group has always had hired seminarians and rabbinical students as their teachers. So that's a difference where Chicago and Washington are more aligned in terms of the programming.
I also wanted to say, because this is such a nice group, a nice sized group, that if throughout this conversation, because we are really trying to connect these communities, so if any questions come to mind, that would be, feels like you want to know more about something that was mentioned or dig a little bit deeper into it, please feel free to kind of turn your camera on, raise your hand, throw it in the chat. We can get to it. And also, in the meantime, let us know which community or where you're coming from as well, because it's just very fun to see all the people coming together here. Sam, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about growing up interfaith and how that has been such a strong part of your journey and your identity.
Sure. Where to begin? Let's see, how much time do we have? I mean, I guess the main thing I want to say is growing up interfaith for me was totally normal, right? I don't know another way of growing up. So I grew up in a home. My father is Jewish, my mother is Presbyterian. And we grew up with both, claiming both and practicing both. And to backtrack a little bit, when my siblings and I were coming into the world, my parents hadn't really discerned how they were going to raise us. And so my mother even offered, if my father wanted to raise us Jewish, she understood. And my father wasn't really practicing at the time. And so they said, well, let's raise our kids both, but you can take them to church, because my mother was much more devout. And so we went to church every Sunday, and then we would go on high holidays to synagogue and sometimes on Fridays as well. But we were really immersed in the church. And then when I hit about middle school, my father started to attend synagogue more and more. But because we were in the church school program, we weren't permitted to go to the Hebrew school program at the same time in the synagogue. And so that was sort of my first window into, something's a little bit different about us, and my first kind of feeling of a little bit of rejection, because I was very curious. I was always asking questions about God and about our traditions. And so I was that kid in the classroom. And so when I hit about 13 or 12 or 13, I started to go through the confirmation program at the church. And again, had a lot of questions. I sort of took it extra seriously because I was growing up in this interfaith home. So I wanted to make sure I understood what this process meant for me and meant for my family. And one of my biggest things was I didn't want that confirmation to be a rejection of my Judaism. And so I really had a lot of questions about that. And so ultimately, when I had my confirmation experience, it was really important to me that my father be present there. And so he knew that I wasn't choosing a parent. I was on this journey as a family together. And again, that's part of the sort of the richness of growing up interfaith. Later on, 10 years later, I had a bat mitzvah. And again, both parents were present there. And it was an interesting experience. I did it in New York City, and it was surrounded by all of these other 20-somethings getting bar and bat mitzvah, which I soon realized a ton of them, most of them were all interfaith kids. So folks that had wanted to have a bar or bat mitzvah at some point in their life, and were finally having the opportunity to do so. And what was really wonderful about that is it was something that came from my own heart. Like I was doing it on my own. I didn't really tell anybody. It was very very Yentl-esque, and nobody else knew that I was doing this until it was time for the bat mitzvah experience. And I think part of that growing up interfaith for me really opened up that curiosity about theology and spirituality. And ultimately I became a religion major in college, and then went on to go to seminary as well. And seminary, I always say, was inspired by really that kind of window into seminary opened up when I had a bat mitzvah, which was always really fun to tell people. When did you feel called to the ministry? When I had a bat mitzvah. So for me, kind of the idea of being like, I don't know if I would be in this profession had I not had the blessing of growing up interfaith. And for me, it really truly was a blessing. I really came to know God through these two lenses. And even as a minister today, I don't feel like I chose a tradition. I still very much connect with the Judaism that raised me, to the God that I know through these two lenses. And I feel like my interfaithness, my bothness, helps me live into all that I am and holds me accountable. And I keep kind of these two traditions in conversation with one another. So I'll say that for now.
I love that. And Susan, I wanted to throw it to you as well because you grew up interfaith. And did you want to share any thoughts or experiences based on how you grew up that way too?
Sure. Well, I grew up a couple generations before Sam did. And my parents, my father was Jewish, my mother was Episcopalian, did feel like they had to make a choice. I don't think it occurred to them that it was possible not to. It was 1960. So I was raised exclusively Jewish. And, a lot of these people who are here probably read my book, so they know this story. But um, so my story has been one of uh, coming from a Jewish education, claiming my interfaithness. I mean, I think for Sam and I, both of us, we had to claim our interfaithness because we didn't have the advantage of a family school or an IFFP to affirm that interfaithness as we were growing up as kids. And the idea that there could be a community supporting such a thing didn't occur to me or to my parents when I was growing up. And so when I ended up in Washington, D.C., I discovered IFFP. I was not a founding member. There were 4, we call them the founding mothers, 2 of them Jewish, 2 of them Christian, who founded IFFP. And I arrived a couple of years later, so it was already up and running. But I was the first interfaith kid on the board and to become the board chair. And it's always been my sort of secret mission to increase the number of adults from interfaith families in the community, just because I think it really enriches the community. And Sam and I had met, I think 10 years before the position opened up for a new minister at IFFP. So I've been like scheming all these years to get her there. And when the minute the position opened up, I like contacted her in Asheville, North Carolina. And I was like, this is it. This is your moment. Jump, come, get up here. And so that was very satisfying. So, and there is something to me really affirming and exciting about having leadership, having clergy who understand that interfaith experience, from the very beginning. At the same time, I have to say, finding a rabbi like Rabbi Ari is such a rarity, who gets this, just absolutely affirms it, absolutely supports it, in spite of not coming from an interfaith family. So I don't even know how that happens. Ari would have to tell us.
Well, I did want to throw it to Rabbi Ari to talk again about your experiences of how important you feel like it is to have this resource in the community that we have in Chicago. Like, what have you experienced? What's the need, or how has it been growing?
Yes. Well, I'll just say, like, so many people who even are, have 2 parents who are brought up with Judaism, and in a home where I was brought up with Judaism, all of my first cousins are Christian. So I think that's fairly common. So, you know, but it was, I, I think it was sort of I don't know. I think that I was brought up in a generation where the grandparents weren't thrilled about that situation. And so I think maybe I internalized some of that family stress of who marries who and how that works out. Um, I'm a rabbi married to a rabbi, and luckily we started co-officiating weddings, on day one as soon as we were allowed to as rabbis. And um it was the most interesting, rewarding, joyful experience of doing these co-officiate weddings, Jewish, Christian, Jewish Muslim, Jewish Hindu, Jewish Buddhist. As religion majors, and probably everyone on this call, we like religion, right? So this is like very interesting work for rabbis. And yeah, being part of the family school has been the entire heart of my rabbinate and the biggest blessing of our lives, to get to know these families who care about religion and care about tradition and culture, and and try, being one person who can help usher in at least the Jewish parts of their stories for their kids. And I've learned so much from Susan, and so much from Sam, so much from David, and from every single person, who's involved in the family school. And it continues to evolve and change, truly. I think, Susan, would you affirm, like, over the decade, like, now I've been at family school, I don't know, yeah, almost 20 years. The whole landscape has changed, and even our evolving understanding of vocabulary and language that we've used has changed, I think.
Yeah, it's certainly. It's interesting to me. There was a theory that there would not be a need for communities like this once religious institutions were more accepting of the idea of interfaith marriage. But I don't believe that's the case. I still feel like it's incredibly valuable to be in community with people who share this dedication to the idea that interfaithness is something positive, that it brings benefits to your family, and that you're still not going to find that in a monotheistic religious institution, no matter how welcoming or inclusive it is. It's not going to center what it is that we've all discovered in these communities, which is that what we have is uniquely inspiring and creative, and really, to me, helps to heal the world. So
I would love to turn the conversation to just that of between all three of you, feel free to chime in on what you feel like the importance of community in this endeavor is. Like having a community versus raising families interfaith on your own. Like what does coming together and having a community to do this bring to that whole endeavor?
Well, I'll jump in. I know so often. So my colleague who I work with at IFFP, Rabbi Debbie Reichman, who similarly is a rabbi that didn't grow up in an interfaith home, but has a passion for interfaith families. When we work with couples, when we do premarital counseling and things like that, or our couples workshop, and we have some alums here. There's often sort of this idea of, could we do both, or maybe we should just do nothing and let our kids decide. We'll let our kids decide. And I often say to people, well, what are they deciding if they have no access to either one of those things, or if they only have access to one, right? And so the blessing of being in community here is saying you have people to sojourn with, people to travel with, and to say, hey, we're coming across this life cycle event. What does this mean for us? Hey, this concept, what is this tradition? What is this important day? What does this mean to our family? What does this mean to me? And giving these kids the tools for which to then discern their identity, or be able to name parts of their identity, is so valuable. I call it sort of like tools on your tool belt. But really giving this abundance of education and of learning, and this fullness of all that these kids are, and all that these families are together. together, I think is a huge blessing. And as a minister, it's particularly meaningful to know that when we come across an important holiday, for example, be it Christmas, I know that I'm preaching Christmas for my Christian members and for my Jewish members and for their kids and for their extended family. And so bringing that awareness into a service or into a sermon and saying, I want to give Christmas as it should be and Christmas as it can be at the same time, I think is really powerful. And my hope is always that people are leaving filled up with things to think about, no matter what their tradition is, or if they even have no tradition at all, right? That there's a space for everybody at the table. And there's a space for discernment, and there's a space for education and tool building.
I would say often couples come to us at about the time when their young children are ready for education. And the number one, I surveyed this years ago. I should do it again more recently, but the number one reason that they gave for coming to such a community was to get sort of interfaith literacy for their kids, that they wanted them to have the basic, stories from each tradition, etc. But I think from a kid's point of view, what is most powerful is just being in that classroom or that holiday celebration and being surrounded by other kids who are also interfaith kids. And having grown up without having that kind of community as an interfaith kid who was always kind of on a margin, I don't think we can underestimate how powerful that is for them to grow up feeling at the center and not at the margins.
Yeah. And I would just add, when we gather, it's safe and there's warmth and it's affirming. And I think that that's necessary for us in life, however old you are, to have that feeling of belonging. And so, the community is so important on so many levels. It's much more than a school or a Sunday school or
I'd love to talk about too I know we've mentioned some of them, but the adult programs as well that are happening, because so much of it is, we focus on bringing these kids into what's happening, but what else is happening or are you seeing happening is being offered to the adults in your communities? Can throw it specifically, or maybe we have already covered it, so I don't want to retrod.
I don't think we've got. So I think we're just being polite.
Everybody's being so polite, and I love it for us.
Who do you want to start?
Well, my kids are long gone. They're 30 and 27, and I was not attending very regularly the last few years, partly because of the pandemic, and then my kids are grown, whatever. But this year I've actually stepped back into more of a role of organizing some of the adult education. So we do it every week. We do, an hour of what we call the gathering, which is basically prayers, reflections, songs. Sam would call it worship. And then we have 15 minutes of bagels and coffee. And then the kids go off to the hour of Sunday school, religious education, and the adults have adult education during that hour. So it's every single week. And some of the recent ones that I'm organizing are bar and bat mitzvah. How did you decide whether to do it or not? And if you do, what does that look like? Because it is optional and not everybody decides to do it. Another one is, I'm hoping to pull this off, being a secular humanist or atheist at IFFP. How does that feel? What is that like? And we're doing one for being a Catholic at IFFP. How does that feel? What is that like? Because our Christian side, parents are, I would say, majority Protestant, or maybe half and half Protestant and Catholic. And our liturgy and our minister are more Protestant, or sometimes even Unitarian-ish, rather than being overtly Catholic. So I think the Catholics have a more of a minority feel within our group, and we don't have a regular communion add-on program the way that you do. We have done it a couple of times, but our support from we don't have as much support from the local Catholic hierarchy as you do. So other education topics might be less interfaith, families specific. We just had one on white Christian nationalism and politics, because we have an author in our community who's written books on that. Sometimes we talk about community service more generally, or environmental issues more generally.
I can talk about the family schools, adult programs recently. We try to alternate between speakers and small group discussions, because one of the things that has happened over the years is people say, I don't know these people. I see them once every 2 weeks. So name tags are a big thing, but also just being able to talk to one another is important. So sometimes we have speakers that facilitate small group discussions, but one of the most powerful ones we've had lately was Ari's husband, Evan, who spoke on anti-Semitism in October. And as he said, it's a very difficult conversation to have, but a very necessary one. And we were a full house that day. We have a couples group, and they were there. We had people bringing their parents to that, and just really involved serious questions about this. And we know it's going to be more and more present for us. And as kids get into high school and college, that's a factor. So certainly, and we also had a gentleman who's a musicologist who was raised Palestinian, and he played music of the Middle East, and that was powerful too. So our seventh graders who are studying the history of the two religions were there for that, because they've been learning about Islam, and then they were there for the anti-Semitism talk, because much of their study this year is involved with Jewish Catholic relations, and anti-Semitism is historically a big part of that. So it's a dynamic program, and it's well attended, and we're pretty proud of it.
If I can say one thing about adult education, none of us ever graduate from our religions or graduate from our faith journeys. We're constantly growing and deepening. And Ari Moffic, she was was one of the officiants who married me. So I love all the people on this call. But when I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, I didn't really have a Jewish community that I could tap into. Ari gave me some wonderful advice at the time and said, you're your kids' best teachers. You're going to find your people, find your communities, find the traditions that you're going to build at home. And I think it is an important thing to remember that at the end of the day, whatever we provide, at the end of the day, our children are looking to us, right? They're looking to us for some of that permission, some of that pride, some of that education. And so if we're not engaged, then why should they be engaged? And so I think thinking about the importance of adult ed for one's own self, for many of us on the call, thinking about how can I deepen my own understanding of my tradition, of my partner's tradition, of issues of the world, what it means to be interfaith in the world. So kind of this idea that we should constantly be seeking out the chance to grow. And even after our kids have up and gone to their own things, life doesn't end there. You're continuing to study, continuing to grow in this new chapter as well. So I offer that.
I did want to draw attention to a question from Ross in the chat asking, I think particularly for the DC folks, what do the religious services look like? What, are they Jewish services some weeks or Catholic services or Christian or combined? Yeah, we'd love to hear more about what those services are.
Yeah, so we have an interfaith service every week in the sense we have some elements of our service that are pretty consistent. So we have kind of an interfaith call, you would probably say a call to worship or an interfaith responsive reading. So the start of our gathering, we do the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, and we do the Lord's Prayer together. We have we have a prayers to the people. We have a time for kind of prayers and concerns. And we have a charge and benediction at the end. So we have some things that are pretty consistent. That said, we'll often theme our year. Like this year, our theme is diving for pearls, and we're just kind of seeking out those pearls and wisdom in our traditions. And then every week we'll have a gathering that's centered around a theme. And oftentimes if it's a holiday, that will be the theme. So it might feel like a more, whatever Jewish feeling day or more Christian, we try to always bring that balance. And so even with musically, we'll try to have, if it's a song from a Christian hymnal or a Catholic hymnal, then we'll make sure we have a Jewish song and maybe some Hebrew. And then sometimes, you throw in a little bit of, Paul Simon or something too. So, but the idea is that we're trying to balance it out, and the rabbi and I take turns offering the reflection as well. So it's, again, it should feel, in our estimation, it should feel like a balanced experience. Like, for example, in our next thing, we're going to be preparing for Advent. We're doing, an Advent service, and then we're having an intergenerational Advent wreath making where all, again, are welcome and a part of that as well. So just like I said earlier, we have all these different services, but everyone is invited to participate fully in the services. Did I capture that, Sue, or anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the week, they're really, like, we had Sukkot, we had a sukkah. The kids shook lulavs made out of pool noodles. And if you were there that week, it would have felt kind of Jewish with some other Christian stuff in there. And then the next week was All Souls and All Saints. And so it probably felt more Christian that week. But over the course of the year, there's the balance, as well as with those elements that are included each week. And I'll just say that the call to prayer and the benediction and charge were actually written by the Interfaith Families community that was very small that existed in San Francisco in the Bay Area at the time I was writing my first book. And they kind of graduated into non-existence. And there've been other small groups that have done this, where a group of families raises their kids together, and when the kids are gone, the group sunsets. So there is no longer a group in San Francisco, but their benediction and charge lives on because IFFP in DC still uses it.
That's an interesting connection to a next question I was going to ask, which is why aren't we seeing more programs like this across the country, do you think? I mean, I don't know if we can have a definitive answer to that, but any thoughts on why this still feels like such a unique endeavor and it's located in very specific places?
I feel like I'm talking too much.
Yeah, I mean, so I was gonna say, Susan, I think you have so many answers to this, but I mean, part of it is that people have to realize this is even a possibility or an option. And I think for a lot of people, if they seek out the advice, at least of a rabbi, they're going to be told to raise their kids exclusively one or the other, and they're going to confuse their kids. And it's going to be a theologic lie, and that it's going to water it all down. And it's just better to pick one. So I think that's the advice they get, or even from extended family or parents. And that's just what I think people hear. That's one issue. The second is just interest in religion, period. you have to really be willing to kind of do the countercultural thing of wanting to actually engage with religion. And, you know, for a lot of people, they're finding enough meaning and fulfillment in what they're doing in the home and with extended family, and don't maybe realize the value of anything else. I think those are a couple reasons. But Susan, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
I don't know. I've done everything I could, not everything. I've done a lot to try to get the word out. I often think about and quote something I heard Rabbi Ari when I visited Chicago, and you brought together a small group of rabbis to meet with me. I think you'll remember this. And we kind of went around the room, and every one of them said that of the young couples they were marrying, they estimated that half were saying they wanted to do both. So I don't think it's a lack of people wanting to do this. I think people want to do this, and they would do this if they had more support. And with the internet, you would think that they could find our groups. Part of the problem has been historically, we've had to say, oh, you're in Kansas or you're in Tennessee, we can't really help you unless you want to rebuild everything that we've built. And it took us 20, 30 years to build it. And it's a huge amount of work to build it. Dave and Patty will tell you. So there has been some more engagement across the country with the pandemic, with programming happening online. You know, people are more likely to encounter stuff online, and there is that possibility of having online communities, but it's not the same as being in person. We all know that. So,
But I mean, at IFFP, we have, and one of the blessings of COVID is we have virtual membership, and I'm seeing Katie shared a little bit about that in the chat there. But you know, we have a really nice group of virtual families from across the country, and we even have some international folks too. So I think that's been, and one of our board chairs, I think, who's on the call as well, is a virtual member. So I think that's been one of the blessings for folks who are, you know, don't have community maybe where they are, or only have a couple of families. They can be a part of, you know, a place like IFFP or the family school, where they could be connected to us, and then also get virtual education and get the gatherings, and then, you know, also seek out some community where they are as well. And we've found with doing our couples workshops, now we do them basically all virtually, because we're able to just be more available to folks who are from different parts of the world, of the country and world. So I think that again, one of those blessings of COVID. We all learned to use Zoom at the same time, and just, you know, the possibilities that we're even gathering today. And so I think obviously it'd be wonderful to see these pop up everywhere, and maybe, God willing, one day they will, right? But I think for now, just starting to build that momentum virtually is a great way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, and Sam, I don't know what you think about this, but like, I would love to go to my seminary, you know, Hebrew Union College, the Reform Movement Seminary, and say, look, Rabbi, you know, as you're becoming rabbis, if you feel moved to co-officiate, your couples may want to continue on with both religions, and here are tools to be able to do that. But I mean, I would never be allowed to have that conversation within our seminary. I don't know, Sam, would you be able to tell like future ministers who might want to co-officiate, like, think about this, or there'd be no?
Yeah, I mean, I think there would be some that are open to it, and some maybe would struggle more, right? I think and I think Sue's been trying to do this work a little bit too, of just like building these networks up, right? And I know that we've been doing it as just clergy colleagues, you know, but just starting to be able to have more folks that we can recommend, or that we can that we know that we, you know, are aligned with, so folks, you know, we can recommend those folks out. I'm like, I can't be there for you, but Ari Moffic's amazing, you know, things like that. And so I think building up those networks is huge, and that's why even tonight is such an important night too, because it's also families knowing each other, you know, and I've been through this too, you know, like, you can do it also.
It sounds like a takeaway already is that Chicago and the suburbs can learn from the virtual offerings from DC. So that's one thing we'll need to connect on because it sounds like there's a lot of community. Ross, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Ross Meskin. I'm the director of the Chicago Interfaith Family School for 3 years now. So David and Ari do all the hard lifting, and it's a great job. But I guess my question is, so we have tried digital families. You know, during COVID, we were open to it, and it was working because we were all digital, and we heard a lot of goods and bads to it, that we could have some really cool speakers from around the country, and we have one of our founding rabbis lived in Montana for years, and we got to see him again. So there were some great benefits to it. After COVID, when we all came back, which we all, you know, I think the reason COVID worked so well is because we had built this strong community. So just seeing each other online was cool too. But when we came back, you know, we wanted to get back encouraging people, encouraging our parents that this wasn't the family, this wasn't the Sunday school of my generation, where dad would drop me off at the temple, and he'd go to the gym for 2 hours, and come back with a bag of bagels, and that was Sunday. And you know, we don't do that in Chicago. Our philosophy is it's a volunteer organization. All of our committees are volunteers, all of our services, all of our parties, all of our classes, everything is planned by the parents. And so part of the deal is you have to be engaged. You can't just pay your money and drop your kid off. So my question is, how do you keep that community, and how do you keep that adult engagement? Because like you said, Reverend, we want everyone's learning. We're all on this journey together. We're raising my kids as interfaith, but now my wife and I are interfaith. This is just the way it happens. So how do you keep that benefit and the parental engagement and the adult ed with people from Iowa or Wyoming in the Chicago group?
Yeah, so the way that our virtual school works is similarly, the parents are the teachers as well in those classrooms as, you know, also. So we have, you know, several virtual classes, and, you know, because it's a smaller cohort, we also have some combined classes. But the way that we have been doing it is, you know, we invite everybody to tune in to our gathering online who's a virtual member. So they attend our gathering online, hopefully. And then immediately afterward, we have Sunday school. And so the folks who are in person will go to their local Sunday school classrooms, also, you know, led by the parents. And then those who are online will go to their Sunday school classrooms that are, you know, led by parents. And we also have our Hebrew teachers. We have a Hebrew teacher who's virtual, who'll pop in, teach some Hebrew to one class, pop into another class, and vice versa. And our music person will record music so they can actually play music. So the curriculum is, you know, basically the same. And so they're learning the same thing. It's just done in a digital or virtual format. And then when we get to coming of age, we offer that hybrid. So because that's sort of a more specialized program. And so folks are able to tune in hybrid. So again, it doesn't, you know, it's still fairly new. It's, you know, we're only COVID was only a few years ago. And so, but it's going well, and we're continuing to adjust it and make tweaks, you know, as we're able. But again, it's not, you know, it's different than, you know, if we were all in person, but it's given us the gift of having people re-engage who once left the community because they moved away. And it's the opportunity for people to come and be a part of it, where if we weren't here, they wouldn't have anything. Yeah.
I would just add, you know, IFFP invested in, for instance, tech equipment and staffing to make the hybrid really robust and fluid. And we're also just really lucky. Rabbi Debbie is great with tech stuff. She's a Trekkie. And so, for instance, the other day I did an adult group with somebody that I'm working with in London, and I was there in person and she was on the big screen, and we were having a conversation, and there were people in the room watching and asking questions, and there were people online, and she could do the chat. And it just worked. I couldn't have imagined this 5 years ago. So
Yeah, and I think too, like during the gathering, exactly. They're tuning in the chat, they're sharing their joys in the chat, they're sharing their concerns. So it's also bringing in, we have board members, we have 2 actually on this call who are virtual members. And so, I think bringing them into that, and then also thinking of creative ways to just build community, whatever, Zoom trivia night or whatever it is, things like that, just trying to kind of find ways to build community for those members, I think is valuable, or to have virtual experiences. We had a virtual, service and, in commemoration of October 7th, that was virtual. It was fully virtual. So folks could tune in who are local or virtual. And again, another way to just build community, just to get people, invested and being able to participate fully.
Reverend Sam said most of what I was gonna say. But just to add, so my husband is a board member for IFFP. We're virtual members from Minneapolis. And as part of our like dues every year, I think one thing that was new this year that we incorporated was, how are you going to give back service to the community? And so virtual members are also held to that same standard of how can you provide virtual support for our community? And so for us, that is serving as a board member representative for the needs of the virtual community. For me, that has been like doing holiday trivia games during the annual Christmas party for virtual members. And so we just have different acts of service, but we still try to give back. And we're just really glad to have the virtual option, because there isn't a community where we live now, and it helps us stay engaged and have the support that we need to raise our son and our soon to be next baby, Interfaith.
Dave, you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah, so Ari mentioned earlier, kind of in one of her comments about how organized religion in general is seeing some membership declines, and we've seen, everyone here has mentioned COVID was a challenge. My question is really, I'm curious what other groups here and what people are doing to grow membership. Like we've got a few staples, like anyone that I talk to that references that they have kids and that they are, one of them is Jewish and one of them is any sort of Christian, I bring it up. We post on moms groups because there's enough moms and dads here that know that the schedule runs through the mom. So if the mom thinks it's a good idea, it usually has a good chance of happening. I'm just kind of curious what you guys do to bring in and find new people that are interested in this.
Well, in DC, twice a year now, we do a young couples workshop open to anybody. And it's what, 6 weeks? 4 weeks?
4 weeks. An interfaith couples workshop.
Yeah. In 4 weeks, interfaith couples workshop. And that brings in a lot of people who don't know about the community, who haven't decided necessarily how they're going to raise their kids. And I don't know, I think Ben and Katie can speak to that pathway, right? Didn't you guys start out in the couples workshop?
We first found your book, which brought us to IFFP, but did the couples workshop very soon after we found IFFP. And that's a really nice trajectory. We were with a lot of other young couples that were either just about to get married or just about to have kids, and both of those groups are really great targets for building the community. But yes, having our first son was like the really big driver, and then we found Sue's book. So that was, I think the book and the podcast and the other outreach things are definitely a good way of reaching out to people too. And I know that our team has, because of this virtual membership option, we've tried to increase some of our virtual presence through social media to also say you can do all of this from wherever you are. You can be part of our couples workshop from anywhere.
David's hand is up. Yeah.
Yeah, what I would say is the best thing that has added to our cohort, especially since COVID, has been our under 5 group. I mean, we think of it as our farm team, you know, and there are really engaged families. It's not really, you know, for kids under 5, it's not really education per se in interfaith. That has to sort of begin in kindergarten, but it's community building and parents who just want to share experiences and form bonds. And that's led to our big cohort in the early grades, kindergarten, first and second, which is bodes well for the future years. The thing I was going to ask our friends in DC, what has been the influence of travel sports when kids get to be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and their weekends are taken up with, sorry, we can't be there. We can only be there maybe half the time or whatever. This is hardly anything new. But these are families who invest a lot in their kids. They invest in 2 religions and they invest in sports and programs and stuff on the weekends. What's your experience?
It's definitely an issue, but I have a suspicion that sports is actually a bigger thing in Chicago than it is in DC. I think DC has a lot of nerds that don't do sports. I don't know. What do you think, Sam?
We have some really amazing like faithful members that do these crazy Tetris drop-offs and pick up kids and still do sound and like still teach. It's pretty wild. So I think, I mean, we're not unlike any other community, right, that meets on the weekends. We're battling, you know, all of the other 12 things that they have going on. But I think it's a matter of just, you know, continuing to encourage them to be here as much as they can. And, you know, they come late. We're just so glad you're here. I think the interning program that we have going has been helpful because the kids get a little stipend for interning. And so it is a job. And so some of them come in their soccer outfits straight from practice into the classroom. And so that's just, you know, again, it helps be another, I guess, inspiration to get them there, even if they're kind of tired from the big game or something like that. So, I mean, I think we're not alone in the struggle of recruiting members, right? And, you know, helping make sure people can get there.
Any other questions from folks who are here or comments? You can also, we have a little bit of time left, that if you want to share any of your personal experience with your community that hasn't been covered or echoing something that has been said, we have a little bit of time at the end here.
Can I just say really fast, I was just thinking, recently we've had a lot of grandparents join, which I think is interesting. And we also do, you know, an open house once or twice a year too, where we encourage people like bring your neighbors, bring your friends. And that has borne some fruit. So again, just thinking creatively, we even had a little thing with the board where we have an elevator pitch. You know, what's your elevator pitch? If you could explain the community, you know, in just a sentence, you know, what is it? And so I think, again, you'd be surprised by just the power of invitation. We have some members that are both Jewish or both Christian or not practicing at all, but just like the vibe of the community. And so I think thinking robustly about what we're doing too is, I think, a really powerful thing. I mean, the world is hard, and it's nice to be in a place that says, you belong, let's build some bridges, let's love each other across differences. I mean, that's a really powerful and important message for today. And so remembering that and having the pride to say, I'm a part of this really cool community, you should come.
Yeah. We have not only a fair number of grandparents who are paid members and participate in various ways. There's been one that was a Hebrew teacher. There's one that plays in the band. But we've also had some aunts and uncles join. just because they want to be there with their nieces and nephews and they don't have another community. So
I was gonna say it would be cool. We've talked about this before, Sam and Susan, but if we could sometime at some point get our eighth graders or high schoolers together, as as a next step, I think would be great so that they could have continued community. Or who knows, even, college or beyond of kids who are raised interfaith to find each other because, that's where it kind of drops off in terms of their community, perhaps.
I would love that. That sounds amazing. And I love offerings like this. I don't know how our Sunday morning schedules align, but I mean, having opportunities for people to just build a wider breadth of community is exciting.
Yeah.
That's also a question I would love to ask this group, all of you who took the time to show up and be a part of this. We would love the feedback too of, is this a good time? And if not, is there a better time that would be more attractive to attend for a session like this or a continued session? Feel free to speak up or throw it in the chat, but that's something we're very interested in as well.
I attempted one Zoom session with teens I invited all three groups, but it was like the height of the pandemic. And I think they were going to Zoom school at the time. And the idea of doing one more hour of Zoom was too much for them, I think. But we could try it again. It was always the dream of Rabbi White, may his memory be for our blessing, our first rabbi, to do like a weekend in New York together or in Chicago or in DC and have people stay at people's houses. But it just always seemed like a lot of work to coordinate it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like the idea of any night during the week, Tuesday night, great for this type of event, but maybe we try to schedule something with the groups on Sundays. I don't know if the timing works out, but like if we wanted to build some of that camaraderie, we could figure out how to have the adult ed sessions, and then maybe even separately for each one of the classes, to build some sort of, hey, there are other people outside of your school that are going through the same thing.
Well, Dave, I'll invite all of you from the Union School. Reverend Sam is going to be with Family School on January 26th. I don't know if you have a session that day, but you're all invited to be with us with Reverend Sam if you want to do that.
Thank you.
In person.
In person.
I'm
Yeah.
Live in
coming.
person.
I'm braving the Chicago weather in January, so please come.
Well, I'll probably just throw it to the group to kind of wrap it up. And then if any other thoughts trickle in, they're more than welcome. But just to kind of bring it to a bit of a bow and say, what do you think the future looks like for interfaith programs? Or what are your hopes for the future of it? If maybe not even what do you think it will look like? What do you hope happens with what we're doing?
Well, I'll just say I'm excited about what's going to happen in interfaith communities next generation when the kids that we've raised come back with their kids. And, what do those second generation interfaith kids look like? What do they want to learn? How do they feel connected? How do they feel their relationships are with these two, origin religions? I just find it very fascinating. I don't know where it's all going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. It's a great question. I hope that we keep growing. I hope that this is, again, I started with that word normal, just like, I hope that this is just a part of life, that we have these communities that we're continuing to grow and build, that we have these confident young people that are being bridge builders just by their existence, and all these couples who just love each other and are making the world a wonderful place just by loving across difference. But I really see all that we're doing as really powerful, larger peace building, larger inclusion of larger belonging work in our faith communities. And so I look forward to these continuing to grow and grow deeper and grow wider. So I feel like I'm living a dream that I get to do this as my job, and it's really a joy to be with you all. All right, do you have any dreams for us? Looking at you, we're looking at you.
I do hope, I do think that we are kind of beyond a lot of binaries at this point, and life is more fluid and open and layered. And I can tell you, I just had a high schooler say to me, "Oh yeah, like when I'm at the Unitarian Church," at which I didn't know that he also hangs out at the Unitarian Church. I was like, "Awesome, that's great." You know, sometimes families censor themselves, or maybe don't say certain things to clergy, or don't share certain things. But I do think a lot of families have these really interesting situations within their family now, and kind of a lot of holidays, and a lot of fluidity of religion. So I do hope that clergy become, more understanding, and even understand what a blessing it is to be raised in this way. So I hope that there is change with that, as from the liberal Jewish point of view. I hope that there is continued change, because I think it is still I think it's still very, very hard for a lot of rabbis to wrap their heads around. So we have a ways to go, I think, but the more relationships that are built, and the more rabbis meet the couples and hear stories and get into it, then that's how it works. And I've seen my own classmates now. We were ordained 18 years ago, and I see them posting, "I just co-officiated. I loved it. It was amazing." I'm like, "Well, I told you, like, it's gonna be your favorite thing." Like, so you gotta try it and hope that your clergy partner is awesome the first time and all that stuff, and then it kind of builds on that.
Well, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to Susan, Rabbi Ari, Reverend Samantha. I believe we're going to end with a blessing from Rabbi Ari and Reverend Samantha. It was something I was supposed to begin with and completely forgot. And I take that as just a beautiful opportunity to end with it instead. I also want to thank David for organizing this, and to Nolene McGrath, who put together the full flow of how this should go and wasn't able to be here. And so I took it on, but she deserves all the credit for creating a seamless flow. So I would love to turn it over to have a blessing, please.
Absolutely. All right, hear this blessing now.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Ye'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
May the Lord make God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May the Lord show you kindness and give you peace. And let us all say, Amen.
Amen.
So good to be with you all.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone.
having
This was great.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Let us know if we can be of support in any way. Thanks for coming. Good to see you all. Good to meet so many of you.
Thanks, Brooke. Great job.
Thanks.
And
It really is like everybody leaving a party. Thanks,
I
everybody.
know. Bye.
Stop
Bye.
the
Irish
recording.
farewells.
Bye.